Hello. You're on the Raskas channel. Vitally with you. Are you ready to hear my new story? Well, let's begin. Lydia was 6 when she first saw her grandmother helping people. A long line of neighbors wound along the creaky porch of their village house. Baba Katya, as Ekaterina Pavlovna was called in the village, sat by the window sorting through herbs and saying things that made adults' faces change. "Don't sell the cow, Matveyevich. Your son will lose his job in a month," she quietly said, a stub man in a faded cap. "Are you kidding, Pavlovna? He lives downtown in the town hall." "How do you know?" Grandma shrugged and continued sorting through the mulberry. Matveyevich left dissatisfied, and a month later he came running out of breath, asking for forgiveness and advice. Sons really are free. In the evening, Lydia snuggled up to her grandmother's warm side. "Granny, how do you know everything in advance?" Ekaterina Pavlovna put down her knitting and stroked her granddaughter's fair head. "It's such a gift, Lidushka. Not a pastime, but a heavy cross." She sighed, looking out the dark window. "Sometimes you don't even want to know, but you see? And you can't always avert trouble. Then you look people in the eyes and understand that they don't yet know what awaits them. But you've already seen." Little Lydia didn't understand the depth of these words then. She understood later, when her grandmother's gift awakened in her. She was 6 when it happened for the first time. A chemistry lesson, the smell of reagents, boring formulas on the board, and suddenly it rolled over her, as if someone had turned off all the sounds and smoke floated before her eyes. She saw tongues of flame in the school lab, saw how the fire spread to the curtains, to the wooden shelves with flasks. "Be careful with the Bunsen burner," Lydia cried out in the middle of a lesson. "There will be a fire in the laboratories." The class burst into laughter. Alexandra Nikolaevna, the chemistry teacher, threw her out the door. And 2 days later, a fire actually broke out in the laboratories due to a faulty burner. It's good that they noticed it quickly. No one came to apologize to her. They began to fear her. They whispered behind her back, "A crazy witch." Only Grandma, hugging her to her chest in the evening, quietly said, "Here it comes to you, granddaughter. Be strong. Be strong." The December evening trembled with the lights of garlands in the shop windows. Lydia was returning from the publishing house later than usual. The quarterly report required the attention of the literary editor. 12 years had passed since that first vision, but today something sank inside. A premonition of disaster crept under her heart. The old house greeted her with the hooting silence of the entrance. She went up to the 3rd floor on foot. The elevator was not working again. She hesitated in front of the door. She took out her keys and suddenly heard a woman's laughter from the apartment. Ringing. Alien. The hand with the key froze. Maybe it was the TV. Maybe Gleb was watching some show. He had promised to be home earlier, was going to cook dinner for her arrival. The laughter was repeated, closer to the door. And Gleb's low voice, "Keep quiet, the neighbors will hear." The key entered the lock somehow by itself. Squeak. Another squeak. The door swung open. They were standing in the hallway. Gleb and a short brunette with brightly painted lips. His hand on her waist, her fingers in his hair. The world. Lydia grabbed the doorframe. Lida. Gleb recoiled from the girl. "You were supposed to come back later?" The voice sounded surprisingly calm. Everything inside was freezing. "Sorry for disturbing you." The brunette slipped past, muttering something about a taxi. The front door slammed. "It's not what you think," Gleb began, uttering that hackneyed phrase that Lydia had heard so many times in movies. "What is this, Gleb? A rehearsal for a play? Or have I gone blind, and that wasn't the woman in our hallway?" He suddenly sagged like a deflated balloon, walked into the living room, and collapsed into his chair. "You know, I'm even glad it turned out this way." His voice sounded tired. Tired of pretending to be lit. Tired of living up to your damn high standards. My standards. Lydia slowly pulled off her coat and came closer. "Don't change," This is a high standard. It's not just that. He jumped up and paced nervously around the room. You're strangling me with your principles, do you understand, Gleb? We can't publish this book. The author copied half the text. Gleb, this deal with the printing house looks dubious. Gleb, let's not get involved with this investor. That is, I'm to blame for the fact I want to run my business honestly. A lump formed in her throat. Honestly? He laughed softly. In our world, Lida, honesty is the path to bankruptcy. I've long wanted to free myself from your moralizing. Are you hindering me from developing my publishing house? You're preventing me from making profitable deals. Because of you, I lost out on an education contract, and there were millions in it. Because there was a kickback scheme, she exclaimed. Exactly. And who doesn't take kickbacks? Who in our field works in white gloves? Gleb came close. His eyes glittered feverishly. We could have lived completely differently a long time ago. But no. You want honest publishing. Lydia took a step back. A stranger stood before her. Not the romantic graduate student from the philology department with whom she once dreamed of reviving the culture of reading in the country. I'm leaving, she said quietly. Good riddance, Gleb said. And don't forget, you have 3 days to pick up your things. The apartment, in case you've forgotten, is registered in my name. She spent the night at the publishing house. An old sofa in the lounge, a scratchy blanket with the logo of a Russian word, strong tea brewed for Uncle Misha. Hold on, daughter, the security guard, a friend of Grandma's, said hoarsely, pouring her a third cup. Ekaterina Pavlovna always said, misfortune comes not to break, but to show you the way. The morning brought another blow. Gleb called an emergency meeting of shareholders, 3 of his friends who held meager shares and hers, and as the majority shareholder, he raised the question of buying out her share. I'm offering $100,000 for your 25%, he said, in a businesslike tone, as if he hadn't been the one who had thrown her things out the door yesterday. At market value, your share is almost $1 million, but given the circumstances... What circumstances? Lydia stood, feeling her legs buckle. The company's financial difficulties, and your, shall we say, emotional state, which prevents an adequate assessment of the situation. She could have objected. She could have demanded an independent assessment. She could. But only one thought was pounding in her head. To leave. To get as far away as possible from this stranger with Gleb's eyes. Okay, she said. Get the paperwork ready. When she returned to the apartment for the remaining things, the locks had already been changed. Evening fell over the city like a snowy mantle. Lydia wandered the streets not knowing where she was going. 100,000 in her bag. All that remained from 5 years of work. No home, no job, no family. Grandma. If Grandma were alive, she would know what to do. That night Lydia dreamed of Ekaterina Pavlovna. Not the old woman her granddaughter remembered, but a younger woman in a flowery headscarf with clear eyes. Get ready, granddaughter. Fate takes a turn, she said, and disappeared. Lydia woke up in a hotel with her heart pounding. Snow was swirling outside the window. The clock showed noon. She wandered around the city for a few more hours, trying to figure herself out. What had happened? Past the theater, past the park where she and Gleb had once kissed under an old oak tree. How strange. Now these memories seemed alien, as if from another life. Near the Florence flower shop, she stopped, attracted by the bright display window. In the middle of winter, a riot of colors. Roses, carnations, some exotic flowers with long names. The shop was on the first floor of an old mansion, with barred windows and a carved door. And then it rolled over her, stronger than ever before. Suddenly the sounds of the street disappeared. There was the smell of burnt rubber and blood. A vision appeared before her eyes. A black executive car with the license plate 545 engulfed in flames. There's a man inside. His face is distorted with pain. He's screaming, knocking on the glass, but the door is jammed. The fire's getting closer to him. His clothes are smoking. Are you okay? Lydia staggered. In front of her stood the same man from the vision. Tall, broad-shouldered, with attentive gray eyes. "Don't get in the car tomorrow," she blurted out, grabbing his sleeve. "Black car number 545. You will be killed." The man recoiled. "What nonsense. Who are you?" "Listen." The lady's voice trembled. "I don't know you, and you don't know me, but I saw it. I see such things sometimes. Your car will explode tomorrow. I smelled Harry, saw the fire, heard you screaming." He looked at her with disbelief, but something in her eyes, in her desperate voice, made him hesitate. "Okay, let's say," he said slowly. "And what should I do?" "Don't get in this car. Just don't get in. Call in sick. Cancel meetings. Anything." He studied her face, then pulled out a business card. "Timur Volkov," he said, handing over a cardboard rectangle. "Call me tomorrow. I want to know if your prediction came true." The next morning, the explosion of a black Mercedes with license plate 545 became the main news. The driver, Anatoly Kornev, died at the scene. The presumed cause was the detonation of an explosive device placed under the bottom of the car. Timur Volkov stood by the window of his office, clutching his phone. Lydia's number was not answering. Who was this woman with tired eyes who saved his life? How did she find out? He found her through contacts in the publishing world. A Prussian word. Yes, literary editor Lydia Belova quit yesterday. She spent the night at the Zdravstvunya publishing house. "Ivan Mikhailovich," Timur was already calling the security guard from the car. "Tell me, where is Lydia Sergeyevna going? It's very important." "And who are you?" the old man asked suspiciously. The man whose life she had saved. There was a pause. "She went to her grandmother's house in the village, quote." The voice finally creaked on the phone. "She said she needed to think things over there, sort everything out. But the weather there isn't right. There's a snowstorm, and the house is deserted, almost cold." Timur started the engine. "Give me the address, Ivan Mikhailovich. I'll find her." Timur found her at the bus station, sitting on a worn bench with one suitcase at her feet. Her small figure in a gray coat seemed quite fragile among the scurrying crowd. In her hands was a ticket for the regular bus to the village of Alkovka. "Lydia Sergeyevna," he called, approaching. She shuddered, looking up, her eyes tired and ringed with dark circles. "Timur Andreevich?" There was surprise in her voice. "How did you find me?" "Does it matter?" He sat down next to her, shaking snow off the collar of his expensive coat. "I am forever in your debt. You saved my life." "Anatoly." She shuddered. "Your driver, he died," Timur answered hoarsely. "He had a wife and 2 children. I will provide for the future, but that will not bring their father back." They were silent. The loudspeaker announced the departure of the bus to Alkovka in 15 minutes. "Let me help you." Timur looked her straight in the eyes. "I know what happened at the publishing house. This glebe," he acted meanly. "Can I offer you a job, a place to live?" "No." Lydia shook her head. "Thank you, but I can handle it myself. I need time to think, to sort myself out. I'm going to my grandmother's house." He wanted to object, but something in her gaze stopped him. Pride, determination. "At least take this." He handed her the envelope. "Please, for my conscience' sake." Lydia hesitated, but then firmly pushed his hand away. "You don't owe me anything. I just saw it and couldn't keep quiet." "Your bus," he said, watching the old minibus with its grimy windows pull up. "Goodbye, Timur Andreevich. Take care." He watched her climb the icy steps and disappear into the bus, and felt a strange unease, as if he were letting go of something important he shouldn't. The drive to Alkovka took 4 hours. The winter twilight was thickening outside. The snowstorm was intensifying. Lydia pressed her forehead against the cold glass, remembering her grandmother's house. The last time she had been there was 5 years ago when she buried Ekaterina Pavlovna, an old hut on the edge of the village, built by her great-grandfather from centuries-old pine trees. 4 windows on the facade, like eyes watching the world. Carved door or frames darkened by time. A wide porch with peeling paint. The house was special. Grandmother called it a place of power. Here she healed people, predicted the future, and assisted village women in childbirth when the hospital was too far away. In the corner of the room, a lamp always burned before ancient icons. It smelled of herbs hung from the ceiling. Alkovka, final stop. The driver croaked. Lydia stepped out into the blizzard. The bus, with a snort of exhaust, disappeared behind a curtain of snow. The small village store was still open. Yellow light from the windows fell on the snowdrifts. She bought bread, cereal, matches, candles, and a few canned goods. "Litka, is that you?" The saleswoman, an elderly woman in a thick sweater, asked in surprise. "Katerina Pavlovna's granddaughter. Are you staying with us for a long time?" "I don't know, Nina Stepanovna." Lydia had trouble remembering the woman's name. "Maybe temporarily, maybe forever." "Oh, in this blizzard. It's about 1 kilometer to your house. Maybe you can spend the night with us." "Thanks, I can manage." The road to the house was buried in snow. Lydia trudged, navigating more by memory than by visible landmarks. The wind was picking up to the south, and the wind blew sharp dust into her face. Near the turnoff to the river, she almost tripped over a dark figure lying in a snowdrift. A person. Lydia bent down and shook off the snow. A middle-aged man, reeked of alcohol. "Hey, get up! Freeze!" The man mumbled something and opened one eye. Sashka Krublikov? Lydia recognized the neighbor's son, a desperate drunk. "Get up, I say. I have to go home." She forced him to get up with difficulty and threw his arm over her shoulder. "Witch's spawn," Sashka muttered with a slurred tongue, but obediently hobbled along next to her. "How's your grandma? Do you see everything?" "Yes, you know everything." Lydia silently led him to the threshold of her parents' house and knocked. A woman with a haggard face opened the door. "Herod has come in again." She clasped her hands, pulling her son in. "Thank you, dear. You're Katya's granddaughter, then?" "She's back." Lydia nodded and wandered on. Grandma's house greeted her with a frozen entryway and the creaking of floorboards. It was dark and cold inside. It smelled of uninhabited space, dust, and mice. She lit a candle and looked around. The furniture was still in its original places, covered with faded sheets. On the walls were yellowed photographs with wounds. A large Russian stove took up almost a third of the kitchen. While I move on to the next chapter, I'll ask you to write what city you're watching me from. Mom. Perhaps I'll write a story about your city. Lydia lit the stove. Fortunately, there was still some wood in the woodpile, but the heat wasn't increasing. The chimney was smoking, and in the living room she discovered a broken window, hastily plugged with a rag. She made the bed and covered herself with 2 blankets and her great-grandmother's patchwork quilt. And still her teeth chattered from the cold. "What am I doing here?" Lydia thought, staring into the darkness. "Where am I running? From what?" By morning, the fever had risen. She would fall into a deep slumber, wake up with chills, and fall asleep again. In her feverish delirium, she saw all sorts of things. Glebe laughing at her grandmother's burning car in her face. In one of her fits of lucidity, Lydia struggled to the chest of drawers, took out her grandmother's old herbalist, brewed a mixture of coltsfoot, oregano, and thyme in a mug. She drank it and fell back onto the bed. "Granddaughter," a voice reached her through the fever. "It's not time to go yet. Your happiness is just beginning." Grandmother stood by the bed just as Lydia remembered her as a child, stately, with a thick braid styled like a crown on her head, wearing a knitted cardigan with an ornament. "Grandmother," Lydia whispered to her parched lips, "I'm so tired of seeing. Our gift is not a curse, but God's grace." Ekaterina Pavlovna sat on the edge of the bed and placed a cool palm on her granddaughter's forehead. "Just learn to listen to your heart, not your head. Not all visions need to be revealed. Not all troubles can be averted. But sometimes one word spoken at the right time changes destinies. I saved him, Timur, but his driver died. Why is that? It is not for us to decide who lives and who dies. We are only guides. A cool hand stroked her hair, and Lydia fell into a deep sleep. Through the fog of illness, she vaguely remembered her neighbor, Antonina Ivanovna, coming, giving her broth to drink, changing her compresses. Your grandmother Katya was a golden person, the old woman would say, adjusting her pillow. How many she has saved, how many she has helped. She cured me of infertility when the doctors gave up. My pet is already 45, I have 4 grandchildren, and every day I light a candle for the health of Ekaterina Pavlovna. Lydia vaguely remembered how, as a child, her grandmother taught her to cope with the invading visions. When will it come? Don't be afraid, granddaughter, she said, collecting medicinal herbs in the forest. Breathe deeply. Close your eyes if you can. Don't resist. It's like a wave. It rolls in and ebbs. And remembering all the details, colors, sounds, smells, they contain the essence. Memory splashed out images from the past. Here is Lydia, 16 years old, crying on her grandmother's shoulder after an incident at school. Here is her grandmother teaching her to gather herbs under the full moon. There they were, sitting on the porch, and the old woman was telling about her great-grandfather who had built this house, about her grandfather who had never returned from the war, about Lydia's parents who had died in a car accident. Listen, my heart, my ice, echoed Grandma's voice. It will never lie. An SUV was making its way through the snowstorm that was sweeping the roads. Timur gripped the steering wheel tightly, peering into the whiteout. The highway had become a barely discernible track. The windshield wipers couldn't cope with the snow, but he stubbornly moved forward. Uncle Misha, the security guard from the publishing house, didn't want to give up the address. He had to press him. If anything happens to her, Ekaterina Pavlovna from the other world will never forgive me, the old man grumbled. Keep an eye on her, son. She's special. He entered the house, kicking down the frozen door. In the dim light, he spotted a woman's figure on the bed. Lydia was tossing and turning in the fever, muttering something about visions and fire. Hold on, Timur whispered, wrapping her in a blanket. I'm here. I'll take you away from here. He carried her in his arms to the car, and she seemed weightless, like a child. Her feverishly shining eyes opened for a moment. Are you here again? Her voice whispered. I saw you coming. At the private medicus clinic, Lydia was diagnosed with double pneumonia. She was given IVs, injections, and an oxygen mask. For the first 2 days, she didn't regain consciousness. Timur never left her bedside, canceled all appointments, and rescheduled negotiations. When the doctors kicked him out of the room, he sat in the hallway staring into space. On the 3rd day, the fever sided. Lydia opened her eyes and saw Timur sleeping on the table, rumpled, unshaven, with circles under his eyes. Are you here? She whispered. He started, waking up. How are you feeling? Better. Thank you for saving me. Now we're even, he smiled, pouring her some water. You saved my life, and I saved yours. A silence fell over the room, but not awkward, but cozy, like between old friends. I saw you in a dream once, Lydia said hesitantly. Well, not exactly you, but someone similar. And Grandma was there. She always appears when something important is about to happen. Timur listened attentively. Tell me about her, about Grandma. And Lydia told him about Ekaterina Pavlovna, about the country house, about the first manifestations of her gift, about her childhood fears. I was afraid of these visions, she admitted. The children teased me as a witch. When I predicted a fire at school and no one believed me, it was painful. Then I learned to hide it, to tell only those who really needed to know. Like me? Timur nodded. You saved my life, risking looking crazy. I simply couldn't do otherwise. There was a knock on the door. An elegant middle-aged woman stood on the threshold. Her blonde hair was styled in an intricate hairstyle, an expensive coat, and a bouquet of white lilies in her hands. Lydia? She said hesitantly with a slight accent. Lydia Belova. Yes. Lydia sat up on the pillows. And you? Valentina Sergeyevna Belova. The woman took a step forward. I am your aunt, your father's sister. The room seemed to spin before Lydia's eyes. "I have an aunt," she whispered. "I left for Germany in 1994. Married a German. Lost contact with everyone. And then I looked for you, but it was too late. Your parents died." Valentina placed the flowers on the nightstand and hesitantly sat on the edge of the bed. "I found you through social media, then learned about your illness through church records. A priest from Malkovka called me." "Father Georgie?" Lydia was surprised. "But where is he from?" "Your grandmother left him my contact information before she died," Valentina said quietly. "In case you need help." Timur stood up delicately. "I'll leave you alone." When the door closed behind him, Valentina took Lydia's hand. "I know what happened at the publishing house with your partner and the apartment. I want to invite you to move in with me in Berlin. I have a big house, plenty of space, and I own a small publishing house of Russian literature. You won't have to start from scratch." Lydia looked at this unfamiliar woman with such a familiar cut of eyes. Her father's. An unexpected door to a new life was opening before her. "I am very grateful to you," she finally said. "But I think I belong here. I can't explain it. I just feel it." Valentina didn't argue. She merely nodded as if she had expected exactly this answer. "I understand." Ekaterina Pavlovna also never left her native land, even though she was invited to Moscow to the Institute of Parapsychology. She smiled slightly. "I know that the doors of my home are always open for you." A week later, Lydia was discharged. Timur was waiting for her at the exit of the clinic, leaning on the hood of a black SUV. "I rented an apartment for you," he said without preamble. "Small, but cozy." And he wanted to offer a job. "What kind of job?" Lydia squinted in the bright sun, reflecting off the snow. "I plan to create a media holding. I need someone to head the publishing department. A man with experience, taste, and principles." "Why me?" "Because you're an editor who's turned down dubious deals at the cost of your own well-being. I need exactly that kind of person." "And the apartment?" "Count part of your salary." Timur smiled. "Then you can buy it out, if you want." Lydia looked at him, strong, confident, with warm gray eyes, and felt a calm spreading inside her. "Listen to your heart," her grandmother's voice seemed to whisper. "I agree," Lydia said. "To work. And I'd like to rent an apartment myself." "You're an amazingly stubborn woman," Timur laughed, opening the car door for her. "Let's go see your new place." The ruins of a past life were left behind. Ahead, the road to a new one opened up. Mid-April suddenly brought spring warmth to the city. A trickle of drops tinkled, spread into puddles, and illuminated the gray streets with the bright umbrellas of passers-by. The new Slovo publishing house occupied 2 floors in a modern business center. Spacious offices with panoramic windows, designer furniture, paintings by young artists on the walls. A far cry from the cramped offices of the old Russian Slovo. Lydia leafed through the manuscript of a historical novel, making notes in pencil. Over 3 months of working with Timur, they had formed a strong team, established connections with authors, and launched the first projects. "Tea." Timur appeared in the doorway of her office with evening cups. "Thank you," she smiled, pushing the papers aside. "How did the meeting with the printing house go?" "We signed the contract." He sank into the chair opposite. "Lyd, I have an idea. Remember that project? The series of books about folk crafts? I think it's time to launch it. But we planned for the fall. Why wait?" His eyes sparkled with youthful excitement. "We have everything ready, and this will be a breakthrough. High-quality albums at an affordable price." Lydia couldn't help but admire him. How easily this successful businessman was inspired by new ideas. How sincerely he rejoiced at each published volume. She caught herself thinking that over these months she had never regretted her decision to work with him. The door swung open, interrupting their conversation. Timurchik, have you forgotten about our lunch? She pouted capriciously, then turned her gaze to Lydia. Oh, are you busy? Lydia Sergeyevna, Timur has risen. Meet Inessa Valerievna Zolotogorskaya, my fiancée. Inessa, this is Lydia Belova, our editor-in-chief. The bride smiled. Inessa, holding out her perfectly manicured hand. I've heard a lot about you, Lydia. Timur told me so much. The handshake was dry and formal. Very nice. Lydia tried to keep her voice even. Timur Andreevich never mentioned that he had a fiancée. We've been engaged for almost a year. Inessa approached Timur and adjusted the collar of his shirt with a possessive gesture. The wedding is in the fall. You should definitely come. If we finish discussing publishing plans, Timur softly objected, then I'll join you for lunch. Lydia watched them, feeling an unpleasant chill in her chest. Of course, a man like Timur should have a fiancée. Beautiful, prestigious. Why hadn't this thought occurred to her before? Inessa turned out to be a model and clothing designer. In the first weeks of their acquaintance, she was emphasized with kindness. Lydia was interested in the publishing house's work, invited me to fashion shows, and even gave me a designer scarf. She's trying to mend the relationship, Timur said. Inessa grew up in a wealthy family. Then her father was accused of corruption. Everything was taken away. She had to start from scratch on her own. She's a strong girl. But gradually, the warmth in their relationship faded. Inessa began showing up at the publishing house more and more often, interrupting work meetings. Her looks grew colder. A caustic note appeared in her voice. That evening, Lydia stayed late, proofreading the layout. When she left the business center, it was already dark outside. A familiar silhouette loomed at the entrance. Gleb. She flinched, recognizing her former lover. What are you doing here? He looked haggard. Stubble appeared on his face. His expensive coat seemed wrinkled, as if he'd slept in it. We need to talk. His voice sounded hoarse. It's important. They went into a nearby 24-hour cafe. Gleb ordered coffee, nervously tapping his fingers on the tabletop. I have problems, he finally squeezed out. Serious. What kind? Lydia tried to keep her voice neutral. Financial. Remember the textbook project I had pulled off? He lowered his voice. The scheme didn't work. The contractor screwed me, took the money and disappeared. I'm in debt, Lead. Not only the publishing house is at risk, but also my safety. How can I help? She asked, already guessing the answer. Come back. Gleb leaned forward. Not as a woman, although chuckled. I miss you, I won't lie. But right now it's about something else. Your editorial skills, your connections with authors. You could pull the publishing house out of trouble. Lydia silently looked at the man across from her. Once, she had loved him terribly, selflessly. Now a stranger with a familiar face sat before her. I won't come back, Gleb, she said. Quietly, neither as a woman nor as an editor. I thought so. He leaned back in his chair. You know, I often wonder where I took the wrong turn. When I lost myself. And you? Oh, yes. He laughed mirthlessly. Remember what I was like in the philology department? I read Brodsky, dreamed of publishing real literature. And now? Now I only think about how to squeeze money out of debtors and not get shot in an alley. Why did it happen like this, Blep? He shrugged, ignoring the circumstances. First, one compromise for the sake of the publishing house's survival, then another and another. And now you're in a system where either you eat this world, or it eats you. He finished his cold coffee. I made a choice, Lit, but I lost you because of it. Was it worth it? I don't know. Timur called her on his day off. His voice sounded worried. Lydia, I need to go to Alkovka urgently. Mom's sick. What's wrong with her? Pneumonia. Their district hospital doesn't have any normal antibiotics. He could be heard pacing nervously around the room. I'm coming with some medication, and I'm going to ask a strange question. Will you come with me? But why? Yeah, was confused. I promised Mom I'd introduce her to you, he admitted. I told her a lot. And then I'm worried about her. And you know better than me how to care for the sick. An hour later, they were speeding along the highway toward Alkovka. The spring thaw made the road impassable. The SUV's wheels churned through the mud. "Let's stop at your house," Timur suggested. "We'll spend the night there, and then go to Mom's in the morning." The village house greeted them more warmly than last time. Neighbor Antonina Ivanovna, having learned of Lydia's arrival, lit the stove and tidied up. "Everything is blooming, granddaughter," she said, hugging Lydia. The apple trees in the garden were white. Ekaterina Pavlovna loved this time. Lydia led Timur through the house, showing him her treasures. Faded photographs of his parents and grandmother. Books, an antique spinning wheel in the corner of the living room. And this herbalist. She carefully pulled a thick, leather-bound notebook from the shelf. Grandmother's notes. Which herbs to gather, how to make infusions, what ailments they help with. Yes. Timur carefully took the notebook, leafing through the fragile pages, covered in faded ink. A folded sheet of paper suddenly fell out from between the pages. Timur picked it up and unfolded it. "I think this is for you," he said, handing over the paper. "Lidushka, granddaughter," was written in grandmother's familiar handwriting. "If you're reading these lines, it means your time has come. When you find your happiness, don't let it go. Trust your heart, not your fears. Our gift is given not for sorrow, but for joy, to ward off trouble from those dear to us. With love, your grandmother." "When was this written?" Timur asked quietly. The handwriting was already weak. Lydia peered at the lines. "It must have been shortly before her death. She knew you would return here." He looked at Lydia with an incomprehensible expression. "And not alone." They sat on the porch all evening, watching the first stars come out. Lydia talked about her childhood in her school years, her dreams of becoming a writer. "I have a few stories in my desk drawer," she admitted, but she never brought herself to show them. "Show me," Timur asked. "I'm not a critic, but I'll tell you honestly what I think." Galina Petrovna Volkova lived on the outskirts of Alkovka in a solid brick house surrounded by an apple orchard. Despite her illness, she met them at the door. A short woman with graying dark hair and surprisingly youthful eyes. Finally, she smiled, hugging her son. "And you must be Lydia. Timur told me so much about you that I already feel like I've known you my whole life." The house smelled of herbal tea and pies. Lydia helped set the table, while Timur told his mother the latest news. "Let me look at you," said Galina Petrovna when they were alone in the kitchen. "Yes, that's how it should be." "What kind?" Lydia asked, confused. "A real one," the woman answered simply. "You know, I was always afraid that Timur would marry another doll. Fedya, his father, got it into his head that a successful man needs a beautiful label, not a person." "But he has a fiancée," Lydia noted cautiously. "Inessa. She's beautiful." "I know. I've seen photos." Galina Petrovna shook her head. "But it's not about beauty. My son has always been a romantic. As a child, he wrote poetry, saved homeless kittens, dreamed of becoming a traveler. Fedya beat all this out of him for years. A man needs to think about money, not about stupid things," she mimicked in a low voice. "And here is the result. A successful businessman with an emptiness inside." She sighed, stirring her tea. "My son has been searching for a soulmate all his life," Galina Petrovna said, stirring her tea. "I'm afraid that because of his father's influence, he might miss out on his happiness. I don't know what's between you, Lidochka, but I see the way he looks at you." That evening they returned to Grandma's house. Timur told them that his mother was on the mend. The medication had helped, and the fever had gone down. They could have returned to the city, but something kept them here in this old house with its creaking floorboards. After dinner, Timur suggested a walk to the river. The night was warm, the sky strewn with stars. They walked along an overgrown path, occasionally touching hands. "You know," Timur said when they reached the dark surface of the water, "I never wanted to be a businessman." "What did you want? A doctor or a scientist? Someone who makes the world a better place?" He picked up a flat pebble and threw it on the water. Father considered it a whim. "Son, money rules the world. Earn it, and then do whatever you want." Lydia was silent, listening to his voice, merging with the rustle of the waves. I obeyed. Studied economics, entered the family business, succeeded, and only recently realized that all this time I was living someone else's life. "And the new publishing house?" she asked quietly. "Is this a step towards your own?" Yes, he came back to her. In the darkness, his eyes seemed almost black. "With you, for the first time, I felt that I was doing something real, something of my own." He carefully touched her cheek, and it was as if an electric current ran between them. "Lydia, I didn't have time to finish," he did. She leaned forward herself, pressed her lips to his. Everything else disappeared. There was only this night, these stars, and two people who had found each other by the quiet river. Morning brought Lydia a new vision. It came at dawn, finding her half asleep. Vanessa in a short black dress, Timur's office, a man's hands sliding over her waist, crumpled papers on the table, passionate whispers. "We can't hide anymore, Roman." A desk calendar lying nearby. The date is May 15th, in a week. The vision ebbed as suddenly as it had come. Lydia lay, listening to Timur's breathing as he slept next to her. The hair on his temple was slightly silver, and there were shadows under his eyes. His face in his sleep seemed defenseless like a boy's. "What should I do?" she thought, carefully touching his hand. "Should I tell him? But will he believe me? And even if he does, won't it break his heart?" She remembered her grandmother's words. Not all visions need to be told, but is it fair to remain silent about such a betrayal? Timur opened his eyes and smiled sleepily and happily. "Good morning." He pulled her close and kissed her temple. "What are you thinking about?" "Nothing in particular," she lied for the first time in her life. "I'm just happy." The decision had been made. She would remain silent, but she would closely observe Vanessa, her behavior, and try to soften the blow when the truth finally came out. The city greeted them with gray rain and the roar of cars. Vanessa was waiting for them in the lobby of the publishing house, demonstratively checking her watch. 3 days, Timur. You've been gone for 3 days. Her voice rang with tension. I nearly went crazy with worry. "I'm sorry." He hugged her guiltily. "Mom had health problems, you know." Ines' gaze, sliding over his shoulder, was directed straight at Lydia. Cold, appraising. For a moment something flickered in him that made Lydia uneasy. She knows, Lydia thought with horror. She knows, or she's guessing. In the following days, she noticeably changed. Gone were the pretentious whims and mannerisms. She became tougher, more collected, often disappearing into meetings she didn't tell Timur about. Several times, Lydia noticed Inessa quietly talking on the phone, moving away, quickly ending the conversation when someone approached. Once, Lydia overheard a fragment of a phrase. "We'll make up our minds, Romanchka, just be patient." Roman. The same Roman of the exorcism. Timur's best friend, his financial advisor. Timur, absorbed in his work and new feelings, noticed nothing. He flew on the wings of inspiration, gushing with ideas, talking about new projects, and blind to everything that didn't concern the publishing house or Lydia. May 15, Lydia repeated mentally, looking at the calendar. 3 days left. Just 3 days before everything would change. A May evening enveloped the city in a transparent haze. Lydia stood by the window of her new apartment, small but cozy, overlooking the city park. A geranium, her grandmother's favorite flower, was blooming on the windowsill. "Geranium wards off trouble," said Ekaterina Pavlovna. The doorbell pulled her out of her reverie. Gleb stood on the threshold, haggard, with bloodshot eyes, but wearing an expensive suit. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "We've already talked." Lydia hesitated, but still stepped back, letting him into the apartment. "Would you like some tea? Do you have any whiskey?" He sank tiredly onto the sofa. "Just tea." Then tea. She put the kettle on the stove and took out the cups. Gleb sat looking at her new home. Not badly set up. he remarked. "Did your new patron do his best?" "Timur is not my patron," Lydia answered calmly, setting down the cups. "He's my employer and my friend. Just a friend." Gleb smiled wryly. "Never mind, though. That's not what I came to talk about." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "Remember how we started?" he finally said. "Small office, an old computer, our dreams. The first book, a collection of Brodsky's poetry. Unprofitable, but so beautiful. I believed then that we would change the publishing industry in the country. Remember?" "I remember," she answered quietly. "But then reality set in." Gleb rubbed the bridge of his nose wearily. "Rent, taxes, bribes to officials for licenses. You know, when I first entered into a shady deal and we had nothing to pay the printing house for the printed copies, I borrowed from someone, thinking I'd pay it back quickly." He sipped his tea, winced, and then got into it. One deal, then another. First kickback from the paper supplier seemed like manna from heaven. Then I had to share with the regulatory authorities. Then he gave up. You know how you boil a frog? Slowly raise the temperature so it doesn't notice. It was the same with me, degree by degree. Lydia was silent. For the first time she saw in his eyes not self-confidence, but confusion and fear. "I'm in trouble, Lydia," he finally said. "I squandered the publishing house's money, a large sum. It went to pay off a debt to certain people. Now they're demanding more, and I don't have it." "And how can I help?" she asked, already guessing the answer. "You were a co-owner of the publishing house on paper until recently. If I don't return the money, an investigation will begin, and you will be held accountable too. This is blackmail. This is reality." He looked up at her. "I don't want to drag you into it, really, but I have nowhere else to go." "What are you suggesting?" "Lend me the money, or talk to your Timur. He has a ton of money. It's nothing to him." "Are you asking me to borrow money from another man to save you from criminal elements?" Lydia shook her head. "It's nothing, Gleb. I know." He suddenly hunched over, his face contorted. I sank to the very bottom of the lit. God, what am I transformed? She saw a tear roll down his cheek. For the first time in all the years of their acquaintance, Gleb cried. "I can't sleep at night," he whispered. "I keep thinking about I took the wrong turn, when I lost myself. And the worst thing is, I know the answer. Every time I went against my conscience, I told myself, this is temporary, this is necessary, then everything will be different. But this never happened." Gleb, Lydia carefully touched his hand. "You need to go to the police yourself. A sincere confession will soften." "You don't understand," he shook his head. "These people, they will not forgive. They will find me everywhere." "Then run. Leave the country." "For what?" He smiled bitterly. "I don't have a penny to my name. Everything I had went to pay off the interest on the debt. Even the apartment is mortgaged." She looked at this man whom she once loved. Pity and disgust fought in her soul. "I won't give you any money," she finally said, "and I won't ask Timur. But I can talk to my Aunt Valentina in Germany. Perhaps she can help you with your departure." "Thank you," he whispered. That was something. May 15th was sunny and hot. Lydia walked along the corridors of the business center, feeling her heart pounding somewhere in her throat. Today, what she saw in her vision was supposed to happen. Timur was at an off-site meeting. She deliberately came to his office at lunchtime when most of the employees had gone to the cafe. The door to Timur's office was ajar. Voices came from there, quiet but distinct. "We can't hide anymore, Roman." The woman's voice trembled with emotion. "I'm tired of lying. Just be patient a little longer." The man spoke quietly but insistently. "We'll be together very soon, officially." But how? He'll never let me go. Especially now that that editor is hanging around. Don't worry about her. I have a plan. Lydia quietly pushed the door open. Inessa was standing by the window in a tight black dress. Yes. Next to her was a tall man whom Lydia had seen at corporate parties. Roman Savelyev, Timur's financial advisor and his childhood friend. Sorry for the intrusion, Lydia said evenly. They pulled away from each other. Inessa turned pale. Roman nervously tugged at his jacket. Lydia, Inessa exclaimed. That's not exactly it. Interrupted Lydia. You've been dating for a few months, haven't you? Where are you from? Roman began. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're deceiving Timur. Both of you. Inessa suddenly sank into a chair and covered her face with her hands. You don't understand, she said hoarsely. My father is in debt. Our house is under arrest. Roman promised to help if you stay with Timur and marry him. Lydia came closer. It's not that simple, Roman intervened. Timur has a business plan that can bring in millions. I just wanted to redirect part of the investment. Ukraine, Lydia clarified. Call it what you want. He shrugged. Business is business, nothing personal. And Timur, he's your friend since childhood. Friend? Roman grinned. He was always the favorite. He had everything. The attention of his parents, success, money. I had to fight for every crumb. So yes, I deserve a piece of his pie. Lydia looked at them. A beautiful, desperate woman and an envious, embittered man. How similar to the situation with Gleb. The same excuses, the same compromises with conscience. I won't tell Timur, she finally said. You both have to do this. Are you kidding? Inessa raised her head. He will never forgive. Maybe, but it will be fair. 3 days later, Inessa came to the publishing house with the news. She was pregnant. Timur looked stunned, but happy. He rushed around the office, treating everyone to champagne, making plans. Lydia watched Inessa, a triumphant smile of a victorious gleam in her eyes, and an unconscious gesture. A hand slid into her stomach when Timur entered, as if protecting a non-existent life. She's lying, Lydia realized. She's trying to keep him the only way that guarantees success. That evening, Timur invited Lydia to a restaurant to celebrate the news and discuss work plans. She declined for the first time. Something happened? He looked at her in surprise. Are you avoiding me after our trip? Timur. She took a breath. You need to be a sinus, especially now. What do you mean? He frowned. We will have a child, a family, and I will only get in the way. But what happened between us was a wonderful mistake. She looked away. But still a mistake. I don't break up families, Timur. He looked at her with eyes darkened by pain. You don't love me. It doesn't matter. She clenched her fists so hard her nails dug into her palms. There are things more important than love, honor, principles. I'll leave, Timur. I'll go back to the village. Can I work remotely? Lydia, I don't understand what's going on. He took a step toward her. If it was because of Inessa, no, it was simply the right thing to do. That same evening she left, packed her few belongings, locked the apartment, and left the keys with her neighbor. She arrived in the village after midnight when Alkovka had already fallen asleep. First thing in the morning, she went to the cemetery. Her grandmother's grave was well tended. Antonina Ivanovna was looking after it. Lydia laid out some wild flowers and sat down on a bench. Grandma, I did everything right, she whispered. You would have done the same. The wind swayed the branches of the old apple tree, showering the grave with white petals. Lydia closed her eyes, listening to her inner voice. For the first time in a long time, she felt a strange calm, as if her grandmother approved of her choice. Sacrifice atones for sins. Ekaterina Pavlovna's words floated in her memory. Village life flowed leisurely. Lydia tidied the house, worked remotely, and walked by the river in the evenings. Antonina Ivanovna often came to visit, bringing fresh milk, fresh bread, and herbal teas. How can you be so alone, my girl? The old woman shook her head. Young. Beautiful. Hey, haven't you really met? Aunt Tony did. Lydia sighed. But it wasn't meant to be. Why is that? He has another woman. They're expecting a child. Antonina Ivanovna narrowed her eyes, examining her with piercing eyes. And your grandmother, Ekaterina Pavlovna, once did the same, the old woman said thoughtfully. She had a good man. He loved her dearly, but his wife was seriously ill. Ekaterina left. I can't, she said, build someone else's happiness on someone else's grief. And you don't regret it? Lydia asked about her grandmother's choice. Who knows? Antonina Ivanovna shrugged her hands. She didn't show it, I only know that since then her gift has become stronger, as if fate rewarded her for her sacrifice. In those days, Lydia was visited by strange visions, fragmentary ones. She saw Timur surrounded by some people in formal suits, saw Inessa crying in an empty room, saw Roman quickly walking down the corridor with a folder of documents. But she couldn't understand what all this meant. Timur called every day, came twice. Both times Lydia refused to go out to him. She stood behind the curtain watching him walk around the yard, get into the car, drive away. Each time a little slower, as if hoping that she would change her mind. You can't command the heart, Misha, who came to visit her, told Uncle. The guy will disappear. He's completely exhausted without you. He will have a child, she answered firmly, Lydia. I have no right. And if it's not true, the old man asked cautiously, even if she's lying, I still can't interfere. She cried into her pillow at night. She worked during the day, not allowing herself to think about Timur, but her dreams treacherously returned her to those happy days when they built a new publishing house together, when they walked through the city at night, when they sat on the porch of her grandmother's household watching the stars. Sacrifice, atonement, principles. The price turned out to be higher than she thought. The July morning flashed over Al-Lakhovka with the early sun. Lydia, as usual, rose at dawn, a habit inherited from her grandmother. She watered the herb garden, fed the neighbor's cat that had wandered into the house, and put on the kettle. The day promised to be hot, but the old hut remained pleasantly cool. Lydia opened her laptop and checked her email. Among the work emails from the authors and proofreaders had one strange thing from Timur's secretary. Please call urgently. The situation is critical. She called right away. What happened? Olga. Lydia Sergeyevna, we have a problem. The secretary's voice was trembling. Roman Olegovich. He is threatening Timur Andreevich, blackmailing him with some documents. I accidentally overheard their conversation. Something about financial fraud that Timur Andreevich was allegedly carrying out. This is a lie, of course, but Roman Olegovich is threatening to contact the tax office, the police. And Inessa? Asked Lydia, feeling a chill run down her spine. She ran away 3 days ago, after admitting that there was no pregnancy and never was. Lydia closed her eyes. The vision turned out to be correct, but the consequences were more dire than she imagined. Olga, I'm leaving now. Stay in touch. She got ready hastily, throwing the bare necessities into her bag. Before leaving, she glanced into the red corner, where the dimmed lamp flickered before the ancient icon. Grandma, help me, she whispered. When Lydia arrived at the office, chaos reigned there. The employees were whispering in the corners. The secretary was sobbing. The door to Timur's office was locked. Where is he? Asked Lydia. He went to his father's country house, sobbed Olga. I think he decided to tell everything. Timur and his father were standing on the spacious terrace overlooking the well-kept garden. Fyodor Andreevich, a stocky man with graying temples and a heavy gaze, listened silently to his son. I've tried all my life to be what you wanted, father, said Timur. Successful, tough, pragmatic, but that's not. I'm tired of pretending. I love Lydia. And it's not that Inessa lied. It's just that with Lydia I feel like myself, the real me. Fyodor Andreevich turned and suddenly saw Lydia standing in the doorway of the terrace. He meekly assessed her. Is that her? He asked his son, the clairvoyant. Dad, please, Timur said helpfully. Don't start. I was just asking. Fyodor Andreevich approached Lydia. daughter of Sergei and Tatiana Belov, granddaughter of Ekaterina Pavlovna. Yes, Lydia answered in surprise. Did you know my parents? Not only knew. Your father pulled me out of a burning truck during my military service. Saved my life. Timur looked at his father in amazement. For some reason, he never told me. And you never asked, Fyodor Andreevich answered simply. But now that fate has brought you together, he sighed heavily. It seems it's time to stop meddling in your life, son. You're right. I tried to make you a copy of myself, forgetting that you're not me. He turned to Lady. Now tell me about this Roman. What kind of incriminating evidence? What are the risks? A week later, Roman Savek's name disappeared from all company documents. Fyodor Andreevich had used his connections, and Timur's former friend was forced to quickly flee not only the city, but the country. Lydia didn't know the details, but she hadn't received any further threats. Around that time, news arrived from Gleb. He had surrendered to the police, confessing to financial fraud and embezzlement of the publishing house's funds. Lydia was called to testify. I won't guess, she told the investigator. But I won't exaggerate either. She told everything as it happened, the beginning of their collaboration, Gleb's gradual transformation, the compromises he made to save the publishing house. He's not a criminal, rather a victim of circumstances and his own weakness, she concluded. I think he's sincerely remorseful. Aunt Valentina, having learned of the situation, flew in from Germany. I'll help pay for a lawyer, she told Lydia. Gleb was wrong, but he's not a lost cause. He needs to be given a chance. Why are you doing this? Lydia asked in surprise. You don't even know him. Ekaterina Pavlovna taught people not to abandon people in trouble, even those who made mistakes. Inessa appeared on the threshold of Timur's apartment, unexpectedly thinner with circles under her eyes, but still as beautiful. Forgive me, were her first words. I didn't mean for everything to turn out this way. They sat in the kitchen drinking tea, like strangers who had once been close. I truly loved you, Sinessa admitted. But the fear of losing everything, the house, the reputation, was stronger. When my father went bankrupt, it seemed like the whole world was collapsing. And Roman promised to help if I didn't need to explain. Timur interrupted, softly. I understand. She raised her tear-stained eyes to him. You have a right to hate me. I don't hate you. She shook her head. We're just different people now, going down different paths. What will happen to me now? She asked quietly. Timur silently took a folder out of his desk drawer and handed it to her. These are documents for an apartment in St. Petersburg. It's small, but in a good area, and the contact information for a friend of mine at a fashion agency. They're waiting for your call. Why are you doing this? After everything? Because it's right, he answered, simply. You made a mistake, but you deserve a second chance. As Inessa was leaving at the threshold, she turned around. You know, she's special, Lydia. Take care of her. Winter returned to Alkafka with fluffy snow and bitter frost. Lydia was lighting the stove in her grandmother's house when she heard the sound of a car approaching. Looking out the frosty window, she saw a familiar SUV. Her heart skipped a beat. Timur. She hadn't seen him for almost 6 months since that day in his father's office. He walked in, bringing with him frosty air and an armful of willow branches wrapped in crisp paper. It's not the season for willow, Lydia smiled. Where did you find them? Father's greenhouse. Remember, you said that Grandma loved willow. She nodded silently, accepting the bouquet. The twigs smelled of spring and hope. I brought something else. Timur pulled an old, faded photograph from his pocket. He found it in a family album. The picture showed 2 young soldiers standing, hugging against the backdrop of a dilapidated building. One of them, with a strong chin and familiar eyes, was clearly Lydia's father. My grandfather and your father, Timur explained. Frontline friends. Grandfather always said that Sergei Belov saved his life, and then his son saved his father. Our destinies have been intertwined for 3 generations now, Lydia. They sat by the stove, listening to the crackling of the logs. Snow slowly fell outside. Why didn't you say anything? Timur finally asked. About the conduct of the SNS and Roman. I didn't want to hurt you, Lydia answered quietly. I thought you had the right to find out everything yourself. And when she announced the pregnancy, I felt it was a lie. But I couldn't interfere. It wouldn't have been fair. Timur took her hands in his. Forgive me for making you suffer, for not seeing the deception earlier. You have nothing to apologize for. There is. He looked her straight in the eyes. I should have fought for you harder. I should have trusted you more than anyone else. They talked until late at night about work, about the future of the publishing house, about their dreams and fears. And with every word, the past receded further and further, making room for new, honest feelings. Spring blossomed in full bloom when they met again at the very flower shop where it all began. Timur was waiting for her at the entrance, nervously shifting from foot to foot. Do you remember this day? He asked when Lydia approached. This is where you saved my life. I remember. She smiled. You looked at me like I was crazy. And now I look at me like the most amazing woman in the world. He dropped to one knee right in the middle of the sidewalk. Lydia Sergeyevna Belova, will you marry me? Passers-by stopped, smiling. A curious saleswoman peeked out of the store, but Lydia saw only his eyes. Gray, deep, full of love. Yes, she answered simply. A year later, the village church in Alkovka, recently restored with funds from Fyodor Andreevich, received guests. Lydia and Timur were married in the same place where her parents had once been married. On the eve of the wedding, Lydia dreamed of her grandmother, not as an old woman, but as a young, beautiful woman in a white dress. Have you found your happiness, granddaughter? She asked, smiling. That's great. Don't lose it. In the morning, Lydia decided to go through her grandmother's things in the old chest again. Under a pile of yellowed lace, she found a box she hadn't noticed before. Inside was a wedding photo, miraculously preserved since the 1950s. Berry, with cornflowers embroidered along the edges. Thank you, Grandma, Lydia whispered, carefully taking out the photo. I will wear it with honor. That day, everyone said the bride glowed with a special light, and some of the elders of Olkhovka, especially the keen-eyed, claimed to have seen the translucent silhouette of an elderly woman next to the newlyweds. Just for a moment, like a blessing from the past. That year, Slovo Publishing House released a series of books about folk traditions and family values. The first of them, a collection of old village recipes and superstitions, was compiled from her grandmother's notes. On the flyleaf, Lydia placed a photograph of a Katerina Pavlovna and a dedication to those who preserve memories and see the future. The gift of foresight had not abandoned Lydia, but now she had learned to accept it not as a burden but as a gift. The ability to protect those you love and guide those who have lost their way. And sometimes, in particularly happy moments, she seemed to hear Grandma Katerina Egronotruna's quiet, approving whisper. Are you on the right path, granddaughter? That's right. I told this story not just about betrayal or an unusual gift. For me, it's primarily about the importance of listening to your heart and not being afraid to leave the past behind in order to embrace the present. We often cling to the familiar, even if it causes pain, and only by losing everything do we find true strength. You know, in each of our lives there are those fateful nights when it seems the world is collapsing. But as Lydia's grandmother used to say, troubles come not to break, but to show the way. I would really like us to be each other's support in the comments today. Tell us how you lived through your difficult moments, what helped you overcome a difficult situation and believe in the best again. Your experience and your wisdom can be a saving light to someone seeking hope right now. The text was read by, especially for the Dom de Raskazov channel. Your likes for us are a quiet knock on the door of our home, a sign that the story resonated in your soul. And a subscription is the key that will always open the door to new encounters. Thank you for being with us today. We wish you good health and only positive changes.